Hello and welcome to the Unit 5 test. Make sure that you take your time and you can pause this as you're taking the questions. Number 1. What happened at Kent State University during a student protest? We talked about this. We saw a bunch of pictures of when this happened. It was part of those student protests at the middle to end of the 1960s. So, what happened at Kent State University during a student protest? Was it a rally in support of escalation of the war in Cambodia? Or the National Guard opened fire and 4 students were killed? Number 2. The conformity of the 1950s led to, so we talked about conformity, that's the idea that everyone wants to be exactly the same. So what did that lead to? A, the Vietnam War, or B, countercultures of the 1960s? Number 3. Why were student protests happening on college campuses in the 1960s and 70s? Why were those students protesting, like we talked about at Kent State? To improve living conditions for college students, or to push for American withdrawal from Vietnam? Why were student protests happening on college campuses in the 60s and the 70s? Number 4. Blank was the United States' main goal in Vietnam. So what was the United States trying to accomplish in Vietnam? And this is literally the same goal that the United States has from right after World War II all the way up until the end of the 1980s. What is the goal of the United States? Was it A, reunifying Vietnam, or B, stopping the spread of communism? Number 5. How did the U.S. get into the Vietnam War without an official declaration of war by Congress? You'll remember that the Vietnam War is not a true war because war was never declared by Congress. So how did so many troops go to Vietnam, and why was the U.S. in this conflict for so long? How did that happen? What was it? Was it the My Lai massacre, or the passage of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution? Number 6. The term feminism describes the theory of, so we looked at some pictures, we talked about this, we watched a video on the different waves of feminism. So what does feminism really mean? Is it A, women's special nature, or B, the equality of men and women? Betty Friedan wrote a book called The Feminine Mistake, which talked about, so we talked about this woman, we talked about what this led to. Was it the satisfaction of women as housewives, or the dissatisfaction housewives felt in their role? Number 8. What was Nixon's role in Watergate? We watched a video on this, we talked about it a couple of times. In fact, we watched 2 videos talking about this. So what was Nixon's role in Watergate? He saw to it that the FBI did not investigate the Watergate break-in and was involved in the cover-up, or he helped collect secret funds at CREEP and spent them on a sabotage campaign. We watched a thing on Richard Nixon's biography. We watched a thing on the actual Watergate scandal. So what was Nixon's role in this whole thing? Number 9. In 1961, Russian President Khrushchev closed the border between East and West Berlin and ordered the building of, so we saw pictures of this, we talked about what Khrushchev's, why he was doing this. So what did he do? Did he build nuclear weapons or the Berlin Wall? Number 10. On November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy was assassinated by, so we saw pictures of this, we watched a video on the biography of Kennedy, we talked about the cover-up, conspiracy. theory. We talked about the different commissions that were set up to investigate this. So who assassinated President Kennedy? Was it James Earl Ray or Lee Harvey Oswald? Number 11. Which of the following was a major part of Johnson's Great Society? So we're talking about Lyndon B. Johnson. He had all of these ideas coming in of what he wanted to do as president. There were lots of parts of his Great Society. So which of these two was one of that? Was it A, a tax increase, or B, anti-poverty campaign programs? Anti-poverty means trying to help poor people. Number 12. As a result of the Cuban Missile Crisis, so we watched a video on the Cuban Missile Crisis. This takes place during John F. Kennedy's time as president. It was one of the most tense times in U.S. history. So what was the result of that Cuban Missile Crisis? Was it A, Fidel Castro was removed from power, or B, the Soviets removed their missiles from Cuba? 13. Which of the following brought the United States and the Soviet Union to the brink of nuclear war? Was it A, the Cuban Missile Crisis, or B, the signing of the Limited Test Ban Treaty? The televised presidential debates between Kennedy and Nixon made Kennedy look A, like a better choice than Nixon, or B, like Nixon was a better choice. How did those presidential debates make John F. Kennedy look? 15. The Soviets built the Berlin Wall in order to prevent. Why was the Berlin Wall built? A, an American invasion, or B, East Germans from fleeing to the West. We would be talking about West Berlin or West Germany. So why was this Berlin Wall built? Why did the Soviets build that? 16. One task of the Peace Corps volunteers in poor areas was to. So what was the job of the Peace Corps? Was it to organize rebel groups or raise the standard of living, basically to make things better for people? This was started by John F. Kennedy. What was the ideas behind this? 17. A goal of the American Indian movement was, this is also known as AIM, so what was a goal? A, equality, or B, to get revenge? 18. What happened to Nixon at the end of Watergate? So what happened to President Nixon at the end of the Watergate scandal? Did he stay in as president until the end of his term? Or did he step down as president and Ford becomes president? What happened to Nixon at the end of Watergate? 19. Nixon did what about the war in Vietnam? So what did President Nixon do as far as Vietnam was concerned? Did he A, remove the U.S. troops from Vietnam, or B, add more U.S. troops to Vietnam? What did Nixon do? 20. He was a leader of the Hispanic rights movement and wanted farm laborers to get a good living wage and safe working conditions. We watched a video on this man. We talked about him. We talked about some of the successes that he was able to have and how he really pushed the Hispanic rights movement. So was this A, Cesar Lopez, or B, Cesar Chavez? 21. La Raza was A, the political party that wanted fair treatment for Hispanics, or B, the government agency that was over immigration. What was La Raza? Number 22. Where did the American Indian movement begin? Where did AIM begin? A, Wounded Knee, South Dakota, or B, Minneapolis, Minnesota? Where did AIM begin? 23. Where was the nightclub that changed the LGBTQ movement? We talked about that after this action happened at this nightclub. It really made the LGBTQ equal rights movement, it really put it into action, and it made it a political and a very active movement in the United States to seek equality and protection. So was that A, Stonewall, New York, or B, Berkeley, California? And that'd be the end of our Unit 5 test.